The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Maynard Bangs presiding. We all rise for the Honorable Judge Bangs.
Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of The People versus Moonfall, a 2022 sci-fi disaster film about two astronauts and a conspiracy theorist who discover the moon has left its orbit and is on a collision course with Earth. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Isaac Arthur, you are representing the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Your Honor, Moonfall is supposed to be a disaster movie. Instead, it is a disaster of a movie.
I knew it.
It is a Roland Emmerich film, so we know a few things are going to happen. First, it's going to feature over-the-top destruction with dubious physics supporting what's causing it and what we can fix it with. Second, the good guys are going to survive and triumph against overwhelming odds and internal disagreements. Third, it's going to show us some conspiracy theory most people laugh at and turn out it's true. And fourth, it's going to feature a father who is depressed about his relationship with his son. If Emmerich is directing, it will contain some great special effects, we don't argue that, some snappy if cheesy dialogue and one-liners, a relative indifference to reality, and plot holes you could fly a spaceship through. That comes with the territory and often makes for some great films, Stargate and Independence Day being examples of that. And if you love Emmerich films, it's got the standard elements, but it's getting repetitive and weaker with each new film, and without anything new. In an era of cheap CGI, great special effects can no longer carry a film with a weak plot. Basically, the popcorn is getting pretty stale and the soda pretty flat for these films. So, serving them in a larger bag and bucket doesn't help, because I don't want a trash bag full of stale, cold, greasy popcorn.
Speak for yourself, Mr. Arthur.
I feel attacked.
Yeah.
That's what he calls breakfast.
Exactly. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mr. Save the Moon, Save Ryan Luis Rodriguez. Please present your opening statement.
Irwin Allen, best known as the Master of Disaster, made a name for himself crafting large-scale, star-studded event popcorn movies that earned significant amounts of cash at the box office, with efforts like the Poseidon Adventure scoring 8 Academy Award nominations, the Towering Inferno also receiving 8 nominations, including Best Picture. So these absurd special effects epics certainly had prestige. By the time the 80s rolled around, Irwin was no longer producing films, thanks to the dispiriting results of an aptly named picture, When Time Ran Out. The disaster subgenre died an ignoble death, but in 1996, Roland Emmerich emerged as the heir apparent to Allen's legacy with the special effects intensive spectacle Independence Day. From here, he only went bigger. Godzilla is kind of an outlier, but Emmerich continued with the likes of The Day After Tomorrow, 10,000 BC, and 2012, eventually culminating in 2022's Moonfall. This solid popcorn spectacle is completely unpretentious. It wants nothing more but to put the audience on a visual and sonic adventure for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and that's exactly what it does. Science be damned, this is Emmerich's magnum opus, presenting everything that makes his movies so alluring to the masses without any of the fat or extraneous characters. I'm not here to proclaim that it's a masterpiece, just saying that it deserves its day in a fair and just courtroom. Thank you. Case dismissed.
No. Nice
right.
try. Nice try. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Isaac Arthur, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
Well, the defense is very right that this is very standard for Emmerich, and he certainly has mastered certain parts of it. The film just follows that formula and raises the stakes. So this time the whole moon is moving, and it's going to rip Earth apart, and it's all because the moon is really a massive alien artifact. Now, this part I actually love because it's a giant meg structure. I love those, and I was sad that it didn't get explored more. But it really must have been its MacGuffin for the hollow moon theory. Unfortunately, this goes off the rails quick too. They claim the moon is a Dyson sphere around a white dwarf, which is stretching that term, but is actually possible. But still, white dwarfs are massive, millions of times more massive than our moon is. The science just falls apart, and it does matter. It was built by a benevolent AI who didn't go rogue to ferry humans to Earth to be a safe place from evil alien AI who did go rogue and kill off their creators. Ancient humans from a place long, long ago, or a galaxy far, far away. There's all sorts of problems with all of that, which various handwaves could have managed, but there's virtually no time given over to discussing or showing that, because they try to make it mysterious, so that's a big reveal late in the movie. Alternatively, he says this is a great disaster movie. Fine, but the special effects are great, wonderful. But he spent huge amounts of screen time on epic and impossible disaster shots, spaced around weak plots of struggle and turmoil in various characters, like Doug, who is supposed to nuke the moon, which doesn't even vaguely make sense, Sonny Harper, the estranged teenage son of the main protagonist, and a ton of minor characters who could have been dropped and saved time to explain things. And KC, the over-the-top cliche geek hero who helps handle the exposition of the sciencey concepts, gets scattered around during the film. It's just too many things going on. It feels like the plots of a few different and potentially decent films were all stuffed together in this film, and the result was one single train wreck of a movie, which might be a good title and plot for Emmerich's next disaster flick.
Give him any ideas.
I'd still watch it.
Mr. Rodriguez, the word that stuck out to me was possible. What do you have to say about the science of this film?
Well, I'm glad my distinguished colleague brought up science, because here's my argument against such scrutiny. This discourse is frankly boring. When we discuss and judge films on a scientific basis, we must also discuss intentionality. Roland Emmerich made no promises that Moonfall is scientifically accurate, nor is he pursuing anything to be taken seriously. Are we really going to judge a movie called Moonfall, about when the moon falls, on the same level as the elevated science fiction of the likes of Arrival? It's called science fiction for a reason. It puts the phi in sci-fi, or rather fi, since it's fiction. Are we going to get mad at the 1978 Superman for the scene where he spins the Earth off its axis in order to turn back time? It's Superman, a guy in red and blue tights who flies around a metropolitan city. Are we going to get mad about the time travel implications of Back to the Future and the bootstrap paradox? Are we going to challenge a Grand Day Out for suggesting that the moon is made of cheese? They're not pretending to be something they're not, just like Moonfall. Moonfall operates on a conspiracy theory, the hollow moon hypothesis, which illustrates just how we should interpret the film. It has all the substance of a conspiracy theory, one that the director himself doesn't subscribe to. All it wants is to entertain you. Check your skepticism at the door and just indulge. Thank you. Case dismissed.
Stop that.
All right. Oh.
Mr. Arthur, so you have said that the megastructure is possible, but the type of consequences that the moon coming closer to Earth that are shown, are those feasible? Is there any accuracy to those?
Honestly, no. It's a situation where a lot of effort was made to make a lot of it seem scientifically plausible, and that's, I think, where the defense's case falls apart on saying that the sci-fi part, the science does matter, it isn't sci-fi. You don't have to have a disaster movie that's set in a science fiction tone. You could just have the moon falling down for unknown reasons. They want a sciencey fix, they want the robot aspect to it and the alien aspect to it, and they start putting the sciencey parts and make it sound like there's some science there, but it doesn't work. We have examples throughout the thing where they've introduced it, and that's the key thing. Once you introduce the science into something and try to go for that aspect, then you have to do that relatively cleanly. Otherwise, you just call it magic and make it up as you go. Yes, we leave plenty of room for hand waves. Some of the best sci-fi out there has bad science, but they don't call it out. Here, they're trying to. They're trying to make it a sciencey movie, and yet they get so many things wrong, after putting just enough effort into making you trigger to think about that. That's the key to a movie in that respect is don't bring up the science to the point that you make people think about it and then drop it off there. They put it on the table. They put it as a dish in front of you to think about, and then they mess it up. Don't serve it unless you want people to eat it, as it were. And there's the other aspect of it is, yes, maybe it's not plausible, but again, what about the repetition of it? Yes, it's more wonderful destruction of monuments and great cities, and another new thing, the moon's falling instead of a big alien spaceship. But what's new to it? What's different? How many of the characters could just as easily be from Independence Day or 2012 or one of the earlier films? What is new about this film that really justifies it as anything other than a disaster flick with lots of explosions in it? And if that, why bother with all the characters, so many of them in there, and all the scientific explanations? Why not just show things falling on the planet?
Mr. Rodriguez, any rebuttals?
I mean, I do bump up against the fact that he's saying that there are characters that are extraneous and that if we prune them, the film would be better off. I think that this actually ramps down the typical ensemble that Roland Emmerich movies tend to have. And I think that each character serves their own purpose. I think that if you even look at a character as small as the one that Michael Pena plays, you might think, oh, it's just he's just a Lexus dealer that's just to get product placement in there. Who really cares? But ultimately, he is there to sacrifice his life for his adopted son. So I think that everybody adds a little spice to the gumbo. I don't think that anything is terribly extraneous except for the babysitter character, but I'll address that in a future argument.
All right, sounds good. Mr. Arthur, you may proceed with your next exhibit.
Well, I can't agree on the idea that all these characters weave into it well. And we see this with any number of shows like Game of Thrones, for instance. There's tons of characters that be interesting for a moment, but they draw off the main focus. You got 2 hours for a movie. It's not a TV show, and it usually doesn't even work for those. Keep it compact, to keep the characters limited, and we have characters introduced out there who really don't serve much purpose. We have whole subplot lines that really don't serve much purpose, like planning to nuke the moon. That even makes sense, but it's just there.
Got to nuke something.
This is not going to work out. And so, if you introduce the planet, this is the idea: is it's that the people come into with a certain amount of credulity, they're willing to waive, right? Suspension of disbelief. And the film has a certain amount of it because it's an Emmerich film. You're going in there for the popcorn and the explosions, but they waive it so many times that it becomes too high of a burden. And I think that so many side characters exist only to basically be introduced and take time away for allowing a more streamlined plot that would have avoided so many of those suspension of disbelief moments. And again, there were many potential stories in there that sounded interesting. I would have loved to have seen more about the original empire that humanity came off from. It's just too much being packed in there. So it gets done too quickly. And again, too much screen time to people that, sure, they might have an interesting moment, but they don't really contribute much to the story. And I think that's been true of a lot of Emmerich films. How many main characters, besides the main characters of most of the Emmerich films, how many of them really stick in your head? Not that many.
Harvey Fierstein. For sure.
Yeah.
This movie could have used Harvey Fierstein. Mr. Rodriguez, any rebuttals? Are there characters in here that all serve a purpose?
I believe that most of them do. I think that the one that I already identified, the babysitter, completely is only in there because this is partially funded by Chinese money, and they needed to get some actors that the mainland would recognize. And even though she's not fully Chinese, I believe she's Canadian Chinese. But I think that most of the characters, as I mentioned earlier, I think that they do serve a purpose. And I don't understand how you can have both too much and not enough. I don't understand that. That seems like such a binary thing, but I guess that's just me.
Mr. Arthur, you may proceed with any further exhibits you have.
I would say that it also comes down to too many stereotypes. What characters we see again are not just overused from previous Emmerich films, but so many of them are just what we would expect. They're kind of bland. Casey, as a character, seems to exist only to be a bit of a mocking key character who serves for exposition's sake only. The main protagonist seems mostly to exist there simply to have someone who flies the ship and sacrifices himself, who has an issue with his son, and again, his son seems to exist only for the purpose of existing. He doesn't really seem to actually do anything relevant to saving the planet. So why is he there? there are 50 million or 8 billion stories being told at the time. Why focus in on those characters? And when they do, how many of these characters are really genuinely interesting and new? Do any of them really stick out as, what a fascinating new character with a great and compelling story? I think in that's the weakness of this one is so many characters, so much plot effort, but very little actually interesting and new or unique, mostly just cliche performances.
How dare you disgrace the name of Halle Berry? Mr. Rodriguez, any rebuttals to that, or?
Yes, I want to address this whole thing that the sun does not contribute anything to saving the world. I don't think a character in a disaster movie has to be integral into the grand plan of saving the world. I think the sun does transport Halle Berry's son and the aforementioned babysitter to Colorado where they can be safe. Just because he's not up in the spaceship blasting a bunch of AI aliens doesn't mean that he doesn't serve a purpose.
All right. Mr. Arthur, do you have another exhibit you'd like to present or continue along this line?
I feel the case against this movie is so strong that there's no need to present any more evidence.
Excellent.
It's hubris.
Then, Mr. Rodriguez, you may present your first exhibit for the defense.
I want to discuss the cast of Moonfall for just a second. A lot of Roland Emmerich's films revolve around the two-hander, where the bulk of the narrative rests on the shoulders of two characters, best exemplified by the buddy-buddy relationship between Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum in Independence Day. But what we have here is the rare three-hander.
Whoa.
Split between Academy Award-winning actor Halle Berry, character actor par excellence Patrick Wilson, and John Bradley, who was apparently on Game of Thrones, wouldn't know, didn't watch for very long. Halle Berry is quite excellent in her role, the emotional core of the film, vacillating between her job as the deputy director of NASA and her life as a mother to a small child. Patrick Wilson provides the other emotional core, a disgraced former astronaut just trying to reach his estranged son with issues regarding the law. John Bradley proves to be the real discovery here, giving humanity and much-needed humor to the proceedings as a conspiracy theorist that sadly worships Elon Musk. It's not a perfect film, to be sure. Rounding out the ensemble, we have the always worthwhile Michael Pena, who I brought up earlier, the esteemed gentleman Donald Sutherland, and a promising actor, I want to get his name right, Ian Ikwakwer, who I first noticed in a terrible television series, Inhumans, and he blew every other actor out of the water. It's a smaller ensemble in terms of the big draws out of Emmerich's filmography, but one of the more focused in terms of the narrative and the roles each actor must execute in service of it.
All right. Mr. Arthur, I know you've spoken a lot about the cast, but as an ensemble, is the whole stronger than its parts?
Potentially it could have been. And again, there's some very good actors in there. I think that most of us who did watch the Game of Thrones quite enjoyed seeing Sam make another appearance, but he does a good job with the role, but there wasn't a lot to the role to play. He is kind of playing Sam again, just in a different setting. Again, you got Halle Berry in there. She's a great actress. Sutherland. These are good, strong actors. And I don't want to say they phoned it in, but I really didn't find myself thinking what great performances these were. They just kind of felt like they got it. They got it done. It was not phoned in, but not exceptional. I cannot think of anyone who's acting in that was just great. And there were weaknesses in the plot where it's just like not really doing much with the whole storyline. We see them running into people who, for no apparent reason, during the end of the war, all basically getting out the Confederate flags and chasing them out of town. It's it's not really adding anything to the setting. And so we're seeing not very good bits of writing there, and the actors are doing okay with it, but not great. I don't think they managed to save the film.
All right, Mr. Rodriguez, we've heard a lot about the acting. Would you like to move on to your next line of argumentation?
Yes, absolutely. Whether or not critics have appreciated Roland Emmerich's brand of popcorn bombast, you can't deny his effectiveness in doing what he sets out to do. He knows where to put the camera in any given scene, how to maximize his already extravagant budget. Thanks to pre-sales from independent foreign financiers, he was able to make Moonfall for $146 million. Some of this money came with concessions, which explains why, as previously mentioned, Chinese-Canadian musician and actor Kelly Yu plays a rather significant yet extraneous character. Normally, this would be a case of satisfying too many masters. Emmerich nevertheless displays a sense of craft and composition in everything he does, and the seams between the different requirements he was slavishly indebted to are never visible. I can't imagine being in his position for something this high tension in terms of production, and he handles it with nimble aplomb. I may not be a fan of a lot of his work following Stargate, but it cannot be denied that he is effective in even the worst of scenarios. Moonfall is no Godzilla or Independence Day resurgence. There is something to admire in how it's all put together. As a stylist, he has very few equals, and if he's been doing it for 30 years, clearly someone agrees that he's doing his job at the most effective level. I may prefer the likes of White House Down, but I can still appreciate the craft.
Mr. Arthur, $146 million. That's a lot of hollow moons.
Oh, yeah. Well, the defense was saying that he does his best, in the worst possible case scenarios. This is a man who makes his business doing disaster movies. He should be good at working in catastrophic circumstances. So this film doesn't really add that much new to the same formula. It's what it comes down to. Of course, it's a good basic disaster flick. It's the same one he's made 20 times now. This is the same film, and so we want more out of it. What really sticks out in a disaster movie is those visuals, those stunning moments of looking at this disaster. All those here, yes, but no more so than in any other film these days with CGI. There's not $146 million with a wonderful new flick here. Is there great acting, them compelling moments that make you feel like, I know this character and I want to be with them? No, they are good actors in here, but they're not that compellingly written. And say, what about the plot, the storyline that brings these aliens in here? Is that there? No. And can a film still be successful without that? Yes, he already proved that with Independence Day. We never learned anything about the aliens until the sequel, which might as well not have been made. They are scary in and of themselves. But here we have a sympathetic alien civilization that's actually human, and the big bad AI, and all we get is a 5-second explanation that they went rebellious one day and wiped out anything organic. And they seem to be incredibly stupid and patient. Both them and the AI was trusted to bring humanity back to Earth. This is so much potential that was there, so much funding available to it, and so much practice putting together a good disaster flick, you expect a bit more. So to say the movie's a success, this is from one of the people who has made his career out of making disaster films. Show us the best one yet, not something that feels kind of phoned in.
Mr. Rodriguez, is there anything more here in the, not really world building, but the universe building that Moonfall does that makes it beyond cookie cutter?
I think that the very idea that the moon was built by ancient aliens who happen to be our human ancestors, and they were destroyed by Siri, I think is a very interesting way of making a movie. I'm not going to say that it is the most original film. I mean, it is a disaster film after all. They're not necessarily original. They're pretty derivative as a basis. But I think that taking everything that could have actually happened in this movie, I don't know that there is a better version of this movie. I've now watched the film 4 times, 3 times for this podcast.
Wow.
And although I will never watch it again, I can guarantee you that I don't think that there is a better version of this film.
We'll find some way to make you watch it again, I hope.
No.
Are you resting there?
No, I have one more.
All right, please present it.
When we go to see a movie like Moonfall, we go for the spectacle. But how does Roland Emmerich pull off such spectacle? The shooting time with something so grand in visual ambition is typically 4 to 6 months. With Moonfall, Emmerich had only 61 days, which, due to limitations and restrictions placed on film studios due to the COVID-19 pandemic, had to be accelerated. Doing something of this scale in less than 3 months is almost unthinkable. Combine this with the 1,700 visual effects in the picture, and you have something practically insurmountable. Yet despite these limitations and restrictions, Moonfall thrives visually. The design of the hollow moon and the artificial intelligence tendrils, had they been done in 2002, would be regarded as groundbreaking. Here, Emmerich might hit just short of iconic, but some of the images rendered on celluloid are just as impressive as the best visual effects on the likes of Independence Day, despite building very few sets and doing away with models and everything analog. Also, there's a shot involving the moon coming up behind the Earth that was designed just to promote the film during the pre-sales period at the Cannes Film Festival, and it was so effective that it was worked into the actual film. The fact that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb is quite impressive. Thank you. Case dismissed.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. All sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Arthur, you may begin.
Well, I would say that my respected opponent here has actually managed to do most of my work for me. These effects, he says, would have been great in 2002. And that's true. It's 2022. And as you saw with Dune in 2020, you can do practical effects. It doesn't all have to be CGI. This doesn't all have to be filmed inside the egg at Disney. You don't have to rely only on CGI, and it shows. So you've got all the visuals there, but the visuals, no matter how good they are, cannot carry a film. A good plot, a good story, a good acting can be good even when the effects are horrible. You can go back and watch old Doctor Who or Blake Seven shows from the 70s, and they're cheesy with the effects, but still good. This, though, you can have the best effects in the world, and if the story's not there, if the acting's not there, if the plot's not there, it doesn't hold. Too much is trying to be stuffed into too little time. Well, maybe that's because they didn't have enough time to shoot, but that says take your time and get more there. He has been directing these films for decades. He shouldn't have needed to rush in the end. We've got too much packed into too little, and the rest of the film suffered because of it. Allah was simply not trying to embrace anything new. He went for the formula, and he's gotten that formula mastered, and there wasn't anything new in this film. And for that reason, I don't see any alternative but to find it guilty.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, please present your closing argument.
What we have here is populist popcorn. Moonfall accomplishes everything it set out to do and absolutely nothing more. All it wants is to entertain you without irony and pretension, and we should judge it on those terms. It can't be so bad it's good if you have a good time watching it. There's no such thing as a guilty pleasure, there are just different levels of pleasure. Guilt should never factor into it. As for the scientific elements of the film, I want to remind the jury that they pronounced 2010 not guilty despite many factual inaccuracies, and that was trying to follow up Kubrick's cosmic masterpiece that injected the sci into sci-fi. This is fi, and it doesn't pretend otherwise. We should admire and commend filmmakers for making films that have limited ambitions that ultimately pay off. They didn't give Roland Emmerich $146 million on a lark. The financiers knew exactly what they were paying for, and Emmerich delivered. Just sit down, grab a tasty snack, crack open a savory beverage, and get transported into a fictional universe tenuously tethered to reality. It's a perfectly functional film that 15 years ago would be considered a genuine blockbuster, and it still is. Thank you. Case dismissed.
Still not quite yet. But
Will it ever get dismissed, Your Honor?
I don't know. Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, Mr. Maynard Bangs, and Mr. Big Ben Haslar, we have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
I was just waiting for Samuel Tarley's IBS to kick in space. He did warn you after all.
Yeah, they never really did pay that off.
All right. Fun. I actually love, even though Ryan Luis Rodriguez says talking about the science is boring, I love these sorts of discussions when it comes to sci-fi films. I do like Neil deGrasse Tyson's take on a lot of those space movies. So I thought it was a lot of fun to listen to. Mr. Schlender, what did you think?
I thought this was a very, very good case because this is the kind of movie that I instinctually really, really like. And I need to be careful if it's just because I'm enjoying a bad movie, which people who listen to the show know I have a tendency to do. Yes, punching the hacker card, as it were. So I really wanted to pay very careful attention to the arguments that were being made and try not to lean into my own biases too much. I think Isaac made a very good point about the frivolous characters that we kind of see attached to this. I think there is some minor character bloat, especially when you look at how strong Halle Berry, Patrick Wilson, and the Game of Thrones guy were all together, I think you had enough with
so
them.
sad for him. That's all he gets to be known as is the Game of Thrones
that's
guy.
going to be him for a while.
Let's make him known as the Moonfall guy now.
The Moonfall guy, exactly. And I think you had enough with those three, and then of course you sprinkle in like your Donald Sutherlands and stuff as well. So I thought that was
only in there for like 5 seconds.
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
Like,
he's in there. He's in there quick.
I know.
What favor did he owe them?
But to play devil's advocate here,
I was just
Schlenzo.
going to say real quick, and then what I liked about what Ryan was saying too is that the film is incredibly unpretentious. I really don't think the film tried to wear britches that were too big. I think it really stayed in its lane, and there's really something to be said about that too. So what were you going to say?
Well, going back to the character point, okay, besides their occupations like astronaut, and conspiracy theorist, what can you tell me about those main characters? Like, what are their personalities?
They know the lyrics to Toto or don't know the lyrics to Toto.
Well, I think with Halle Berry and Patrick Wilson, they both have that same bond of parenthood, right? Patrick Wilson, obviously not as close to his son as he'd like to be. Halle Berry does have that stronger family connection, so they have that sense of duty and sacrifice coming not just from their profession, but from their real life. So like if they weren't astronauts, they would still want to save the world because they'd want to save their family. But the fact of the matter is they are astronauts, and that's why we get to follow them.
So a lot of when I'm looking at a case like this, I'm usually seeing like if the defense has an answer for everything that the prosecution sort of lobbies their way. In this way, it almost kind of felt the opposite. And I am not faulting Mr. Rodriguez at all. I think he presented a very good case, much better than I could for this type of film. Especially he's making me appreciate how much was done with the time and budget presented. I didn't know that going in. I do think it'll age poorly effects wise, but for what we get, that's fairly impressive. But the prosecution did strike down almost everything that was presented in defense of the film, as far as the special effects will age poorly. You look at other older films that have practical effects and you still believe them. Whereas if you watch anything with CGI now, 10 years from now, it will not stand the test of time. The science doesn't work for me. The defense mentioned Superman. I actually hate when Superman time travels back in time at the end of the movie.
But you don't hate that he's an alien from Krypton that can fly.
You hate
that's my suspension of disbelief, though. You have to establish that at the beginning of the film, and that's what this film does not do. It establishes your suspension of disbelief with these smoke-like aliens attacking, and okay, that's it. That's where our starting point is, and then it keeps punting down the road as far as the explanations that it's giving you with even more things that don't make sense. Bigger, more confusing things like gravity waves and superstructures that they still don't explain because they keep punting it down the road with, okay, yeah, this is just a vessel that seeded human DNA a million years ago, which also doesn't make sense because what about evolution and things like that? Why would these people care that their DNA exists on another planet and not their lives themselves? So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and harder to believe as it goes on. So that is the point that landed the strongest for me.
I agree with Isaac there. I would have liked more explanation into the aliens as well.
But that's not this movie, though. This movie is about movement and staying kinetic, and it does not want to pause to give you much of a science lesson.
But it does, though.
It does, though. It keeps talking like all these guys are NASA characters, and they're talking in science terms on their laptop and stuff. If you wanted to make some sort of big fantasy, do that. Make Star Wars. But that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to tell it through in the lens of our modern view.
See, I thought
Maynard, what are your thoughts on the case, on the movie?
See, all the mega structure stuff, that was the stuff I liked because that was stuff I didn't expect. I expected it to be a very straightforward disaster about the moon leaving orbit and about to hit Earth, something like when worlds collide kind of thing, like Gorath. And instead we got, and I appreciated that it punted even further. It really just went for even crazier sci-fi because it leaned into the fi. And I know, enough that we've learned from Isaac about like megastructures that there was some feasibility to it. So I thought that was interesting. And then adding in the ancient alien stuff is always like a fun sort of origin explanation that, I mean, gets used a little too much, but I think there's some fun in it.
Yeah, space magic. Okay, end of story. All right, cool.
I mean, but it's more interesting than just the kind of planet trope that's hitting the like that it's going to crash in. It switches it up a little bit to me and that surprised me. What stood with me most is that, as Isaac said, all the characters to me are really forgettable. I mean,
especially the kids. You cut them, you wouldn't even know they were in the movie.
Right. And to me, the reason you would add so many tertiary characters in a disaster movie is to kill them and to kill them off. But a lot of people that we see here, they don't really end up dead. They end up living, and you're kind of like, why? And so I don't understand why having all those characters, what that purpose was. Like you said, we already had the three main characters. The only one that I really remember well is the conspiracy theorist because of his sacrifice and because he's from Game of Thrones. Otherwise, you were able to speak a lot about Halle Berry and Patrick Wilson as like parents and stuff. But to me, that's like not much of a personality. Like, so they have kids and they want to protect them. Like don't all parents. It's not much of a personality to me. And so the characters, more than the effects and the science, is really what makes me kind of forget the movie. Because as Isaac had mentioned, it's a disaster movie. He mentioned, actually it was Ryan, I think, that mentioned like the Towering Inferno and the Poseidon Adventure. And the reason disaster movies really work is because you get at least one main character to really follow along that you want to see survive, that you're through every dangerous moment, you're following him like, yes, like get out of there. That's what gets your attention and sits you on the edge of your seat. But in this one, I did not really care about any of the characters.
There's no sense of danger in this film at all, really.
Right.
You kind of know they're all going to make it through.
And so I don't think the lack of science makes this fail as a sci-fi movie, but the lack of good characters for me to follow makes it feel like it's a failed disaster movie. And for me, that makes it not be able to pass the grade. So I came in here kind of 50-50, but I think those points raised. I think Ryan did have a good case. I think, to me, Ryan answered all the science stuff. It's like who cares? It is sci-fi. But
I care.
But the character stuff, there's not really anything to get out from. So I'm going to go guilty.
You're locking it in. All right. Mr. Schlender, you came in favor of this film. Did anything sway you?
Well, like I said, Isaac hit a lot of points that I did agree with, but I really liked Ryan's case. I think he did have a lot of good answers, and I just don't see this movie the same way Maynard did, like failing as a disaster movie. I mean, we know the moon wasn't really going to hit the Earth, and I thought the characterizations from Patrick Wilson and Halle Berry were just fine. I thought Ryan did a good job of explaining why this ensemble cast worked, and I think they both did a good job of addressing the science, of course, but I'm going to go not guilty on this one.
I do think it's a fun movie. I would watch it again.
I'm the god. I have to go guilty. There was too much on the prosecution side. I agreed with. The characters don't care about them, especially the kids. The science doesn't make sense. They keep punching their explanations. It keeps going off the rails again and again. I never felt any danger at all through this film. It's a CGI splooge fest. I don't know what you want to call it. It's just,
I wouldn't call it that.
It's just nothing. It's just nothing but CGI and pretty images that will hold up for now, but they'll age poorly.
Halle Berry will never age poorly.
I agree. Halle Berry will never age poorly.
He wasn't an effect. She was a practical effect, sir.
That's what we said. The practical effects were great.
Right. They always hold up well.
I'm going to be so loud when this gets read.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Moonfall, we find the defendant guilty.
It was a lot of fun. The verdict is so rendered. I hereby order Moonfall to watch the entire season of Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos and think about what it's done. Court is adjourned.
That is fair. That is a fair verdict.
Hello, this is Crazy Vasily, the cosmonaut who's been trapped in space for 30 years, reporting to you live from, space. Isaac Arthur, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict?
No, I think it's just goes to show that justice always gets done, and if you're going to make a disastrous film, it helps if you're going to make a good disaster film too. So I think they decided wisely, and that Moonfall can stick with the effects that it had from 2002 and try to go in another day with a better film and a little bit better plot and science.
All right, thank you very much. And according to my spectrometer, I've got Ryan Luis Rodriguez. Excuse me, could we get a word on how you feel about today's verdict?
Oh no, it was guilty. Oh boy, I'm so surprised.
No, Mr. Rodriguez, please do not sleep. I only have 30 minutes of connection time to Earth. You must tell my family I love them very much and I miss them. Mr. Rodriguez, no!
Sad.
No sign off, nothing about post trial, or can we get that cosmonaut back here?
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. Yes, let's go back to the post-trial analysis. I don't even remember what my name is. I've been in space so long, you see.
Vasily.
Cosmonaut Vasily.
Yes, I am Cosmonaut Vasily, chiming off.
Chiming. Anyway, I hope you float back into space. I don't know how you floated back necessarily, but fun case, and
That was a good one.
And yeah, and Isaac, I want to hear more about the true science of that megastructure. The moon's hollow, right? It's made of cheese, but it's hollow.
That's something I like, because we said, how would you know if like somebody still has to quarantine around a plant to keep it safe? It might look like an asteroid belt because after a billion years of sitting there, all the dust is collected on the outside of what's a bunch of defense installations. I love the idea of having the moon be like that. It's also the only way to rescue the moon falling on a planet, because there's no natural the moon is falling on you, we're going to fix this. It needs to have some kind of alien MacGuffin to fix it. I love that. I wish they'd done more with it. But the problem was, and they need like a tone for this, where when like a science fiction thing goes, just enough into the science to again kind of serve it up to you on a plate, but then kind of like smashed around. It's badly cooked. Because like nobody watches Sharknado and thinks, oh my God, that's scientifically impossible. You walk in the door knowing that's nonsense. That's
Science
so
ramble.
That suspension of disbelief is set early, right, in that film, not in this film.
Science fantasy.
And
No, Science Scramble is good. I like
a lot
that.
of stuff, but like the science of this is better than in Star Wars, I suppose. It's just that they raised so much of it, and then it's kind of like what Interstellar did. So much of the science is in the right zone, but then they kind of crap all over it once they've actually established that that's what they're talking about. So it's kind of like if you're discussing a completely fictional character, nobody cares if he's a little bit weird or unbelievable. You start talking about an existing historical character and making stuff up as you go. That raises people's alarms, so don't go too deep into the science or raise it as a specter of like technobabble unless you want people to actually think about it.
Hey, shit on Moonfall all you want, but stay away from my Interstellar.
Yeah, I do like Interstellar. I like that robot that walks.
Tars.
Yeah. Now, Isaac, we've had you on here one time to talk about a little documentary called The Core. And then it turned out it was true, right? We're all going to die now, right? Because the core stopped spinning.
The other way.
The core, that one, I think I was a prosecutor on that one too, wasn't I?
Yes.
Yes, you were.
Yeah.
But now we're living it, right? Like, are we all going to die?
No.
Oh, I wanted to.
You heard it here first. Wait, gee, what, Ben? You okay?
What's going to happen to my...
Spoiler alert, Isaac.
What's going to happen to my compass? Do I have to throw it away and get a new one?
I think one of the interesting things that happens a lot of times, because we have this common discussion of terraforming Mars, to say, well, what we need is a magnetic field to help keep the air on, the planet. Say, well, true enough, that's kind of more important than gravity, but spinning metal cores inside of planets take a lot of nukes to get them going. You don't want to be living on the planet when you use those. And what's more, spinning hot metal isn't really a very productive way to make a magnetic field. That's why we don't do that normally. We just use some electricity to metal. So if you want to actually make a nice magnetic thing, you just go ahead and use a good old-fashioned electromagnet and scale it up a bit. I'm not all that worried about the pole shifting. There will be some interesting effects to that, but it's not a world record. It's the worst case scenarios on something like that are definitely not happy, but not really. It's you wouldn't make a disaster film about that one either and be scientifically plausible as well.
Now I kind of do, but like it's people really overreacting to like the tide shifting.
Oh well, yeah. Anything that actually causes people to freak out. But then you're not surviving the disaster. You're surviving your fellow crazy humans who are already here
we
on a
do that
day-to-day
every day.
basis anyway. So
Hey, Isaac,
a normal day with people, you could probably survive when they're having a bad day.
so could we survive without the moon? Like if the moon just disappeared tomorrow?
Where we
It
get our
depends on how
cheese.
it disappeared. We could survive without the sun. It's a lot easier to do the moon. I have a whole episode on us surviving with just modern technology if the sun died or we got kicked out of its orbit. It's doable.
Cool.
You can do it with the moon too, but it's all about how does it get done? Because the moon was formed by an event that ripped the entire crust off the planet. That's not a survivable event. Whatever would knock the moon free in a realistic term is probably going to be equally bad. But if the moon just suddenly teleported out of nowhere, your ecosystem is going to be wrecked. But that doesn't mean gone, because ecosystems are this delicate balance kind of thing, right? New balance is formed because nature isn't a delicately put together machine. It's a heating, boiling, stewing froth of mortar. So a new balance will be maintained, but things are going to be very bad while that happens.
Cool.
Well, without the sun, how am I going to toast? How am I going to tan my little pasty buns?
On a nuclear reactor, of course.
We're the
Oh,
cockroaches
The
of the
answer to all
universe. We
these
destroy our
problems is
sun and
always
we're still
nuclear.
there.
Yeah, nukes are the answer. You can terraform
Always
planets with nuclear
nukes.
bombs. I had an episode once where it got written because somebody challenged me to find a way to use a nuclear bomb in a search and rescue capacity. And I said the introduction of the episode is, I couldn't find one. I found 4 instead.
Oh, jeez. That's awesome.
No, that sounds great. So what have you been up to lately besides, answering people's letters and finding solutions to their problems?
I guess a question before I answer that, when does this actually air?
Probably 3 to 4 weeks from now.
Okay. Well, then probably, and be very if it comes not, most recently I got put in the position of president of the National Space Society, but that won't happen for another week or two.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
I also adopted 3 kids, and
Wow.
You got a real full
Congratulations
dance
there,
card
too.
there, man.
and in the meantime, I wrote a lot of episodes.
I didn't do any of those things.
Yeah.
Well,
3
I adopted
kids.
the kids. I didn't do anything else.
Do they all know each other?
I was
Thanksgiving, and,
recently ousted as president, so this makes more sense.
That was
But
massive
I haven't
corruption.
fully conformed in the one position, so on the off chance that isn't happened, you might need to remove that section of what else. So.
Oh, yeah, well, actually, yeah, we will touch base with you before that goes.
Yeah.
Sure,
I can do
It'll
that,
probably
yeah.
be a bit of big news inside those circles, at least. So if I forget to notice, it will be probably very easily Googleable.
Okay, I'll stop sending this message to everybody I know. Okay.
Don't worry, it's only like 3 people, Isaac.
Yeah.
All of NASA's going to be listening to this episode now. That's good.
Oh, it's on Twitter now. Oh
It's
boy.
possible.
Yeah. And
Should've asked first.
Damn you, Elon.
and still
Hate
busy
Elon.
making YouTube videos and
Oh yes, yeah.
And other content.
It's been a lot of fun with that. I mean, again, it's one of those things about the future. It's say, well, you're going to run out of episodes. Like, well, it's science and the future. So as long as there's still humans to actually watch my episodes anyway, there's a lot more future left to write about.
That's true.
Never really running out of topics, but it's fun. I found out recently that my speech impediment was caused by a tongue tie, and will probably disappear in about 2 months of whatever therapy and surgery. So,
oh,
wow,
interesting.
okay.
yeah, I have no
Wow.
idea what my voice is going to sound like after that, but we'll see.
No one will know
It's
you.
been a crazy last 3 months.
I thought a tongue tie was just like a phrase. I didn't think. It
Yeah,
was,
me too. It's
yeah.
a real condition.
Wow.
That weird little stretchy thing under your tongue, the
Yeah.
frenulum.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, mine's atypically long.
Oh.
But for some reason, none of my speech therapists ever noticed that, so I switched to a new one after taking a break. He's like, "You have a tongue tie." This is on a video call too. I said, "You have a tongue tie." I was like, "Well, how? That can't be right. I've gotten so much improvement over the years from normal therapy." He's like, "Yeah, based on how much effort you put into it, though, I'm gonna guess that the only reason you would have had that corrected by now was there was a physical default." I had one of those. Sends me the therapist, walks in, and she's like, "Oh, look, you have a tongue tie." You guys know who Gene Simmons is?
Yes, I was going to say like Gene
Yeah.
Simmons.
She had a tongue like that, but she used to have the exact same condition. They had surgery on. She sticks that tongue out, starts waving around. I was like, wow.
Now,
How did they not catch this like years ago?
Yeah.
Like
now
So
I'm
how does
picturing
that
you
continuity?
like in Kiss makeup and gear, like playing guitar and stuff, and
And that would
doing
be
the tongue
incredibly
and
tempting,
everything.
too. But all the like tongue exercise involved in learning how to pronounce the letters right and widen my jaw, basically like that. So soon I'll be able to guest perform with Kiss If I only knew how to
Yes.
play a musical instrument, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, there's got to be a science to it. You know, you probably could do drums really easily.
Well,
Like
maybe
it's
the
all
drum
physics.
machine. I
Yeah, there
cannot
you go.
keep a-
You could
yeah. Well,
build a
I
machine.
take my wife to go swing dancing a lot. Well, at least now that COVID's over, we can go dancing again. And I enjoy the dance. I have no rhythm whatsoever. I will always lose track of whatever the beat is for a song.
Yeah. Well, I bet Kiss could use some dancers too, though. So there you go. There's your role in there.
Jeez.
Now we always ask for recommendations from our guests for movies that you think people should see. So, what is a movie that you think people should see?
Should see. I've probably recommended Sunshine before.
Yes, you have.
That's a good
Interstellar.
disaster film.
Interstellar. Do it. Interstellar. Do it.
I think we've done Interstellar, actually.
You guys have done this. I'm sure you have.
Yeah, we've recommended it. I think I've recommended it.
Yeah. Oh. That's a hard one because they haven't made very good ones of late, sci-fi wise. Oh wow.
Doesn't have to be sci-fi. It could be literally.
Yeah, it could be any movie.
Ad Astra.
Anyone,
Ad Astra is good.
Have you ever seen Forbidden Planet?
Yes,
Hey, now
Yeah.
that's a recommendation.
that is a good
That's what it
recommendation.
was last time.
That's a good one. I will recommend that to everybody. That or Metropolis.
Yeah,
Either of which would be a fun one to review from either perspective. So
Yeah, Ben, I can't remember if
It's like classic crazy
did you say he did Forbidden Planet last time? Forbidden Planet's good.
He did.
I'm not
yes,
sure.
and-
I'm not sure if Isaac
Yeah, 'cause he
recommended
talked about his
Metropolis.
dog. Talked about his dog being named after Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, there you go. So,
my cat, Crossbow.
Cat.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Whatever.
Ah,
Cat,
see.
dog, all the same thing.
but
it's still a good movie.
I
But,
didn't recommend Metropolis. Have you guys done that one before?
I think
No.
someone else recommended it, but
I
you
have,
haven't.
but you can go ahead.
Yeah,
You can recommend it. Yeah, it's fine.
there's only so many sci-fi movies,
Well, there's a lot of good ones. I'd recommend Blade Runner, but that's my favorite film. So.
and you've done that one too.
How many
Turns
films
out
have I
Isaac's
recommended?
only seen like 4 movies.
Battlefield Earth. I recommend
There you
Battlefield.
go. Perfect.
Whoa, let's do it. Let's
Love
do it. Why should people see Battlefield Earth?
John Travolta's having such a good time.
Because it is one of those ones like Plan 9 from Outer Space that if you could just get through it, it is worth having watched just so you could find out why Dutch angles should be overused and why prestige films are a bad idea.
My neck hurts so much after that movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, always. In a past life, I've defended Battlefield Earth in a court of law. Successfully, I think, but it's not the way the jury saw it. But
So that
But I
would
thought
not
it was
be
just the judge.
successful.
That was before we
would
had a
be
jury.
What we call a failure.
no, it's what you'd call a failure, Ryan. I'm more positive than that. But have you ever read the book Battlefield Earth?
Well, the story on that one is I was watching. We used to go after finals week in school to go watch a sci-fi film when it was coming out that week. Just kind of be a palate cleanser, right? It was the first movie I ever wanted to walk out of. It was horrible. It's in a bad mood. I was complaining about that to my roommate down at Wright Patterson Air Force Base while I was interning that summer. And he said, "Oh, it's the movie wasn't great, but the book is amazing." And of course, I believed him because that's always true. The book is always better than the movie. And it's kind of like Dune is that they split that into 2 potential movies. So you only have the first half of Battlefield Earth there. And the book is so much worse than even the movie. And this isn't just beyond Hubbard because he's got the Scientology thing going on. Objectively speaking, he was a pretty good writer. Although he kind of comes to sci-fi like from the old westerns, and now I'm going to write some sci-fi that's lasers, pistols, and space stuff. But it is a horrible, horrible book. Horrible.
No love for the Cyclos. But
They're an interesting concept, though. I'll say that.
yeah,
That man hated psychologists.
yes, he did. He probably might have needed one, but I don't know. I can't confirm that because they have good lawyers. Ryan, speaking of lawyers, what is your recommendation?
My recommendation has nothing to do with Moonfall, except that unlike Moonfall, it's actually a good movie, and that is Sergio Corbucci's 1968 film, The Great Silence. Shot in lush CinemaScope, or at least the Italian equivalent, it is a snowbound tension piece with a surprising amount of grisly violence, and all I could think of for 106 minutes was, wow, what a goddamn picture. You can tell that Quentin Tarantino is a fan, as it's clearly an influence on The Hateful Eight and the snowy portions of Django Unchained, and it's always fun to see the nefarious Klaus Kinski in a spaghetti western. Or is it spaghetti northern? I honestly don't know. You can find The Great Silence as part of the Snow Westerns collection on the Criterion Channel, which you should peruse at your leisure. A lot of classics to be found there, including one of my very favorite Robert Altman films, McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Oh, I kind of want to watch some snow westerns. I like those movies. I like those.
Outstanding selection.
Like
Nearly all of them are good, and there's like 10.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I've ever seen a bad Western.
If they decided to make that up to what that style would have been.
Yeah, bad Western. Gosh, I'm sure.
Well, Maynard, while you're
one.
thinking about that, you were our judge. What's your recommendation?
How am I going to think about that while giving my recommendation?
I believe in you.
I didn't want to get too fancy with my recommendation this week, and neither did the film I'm recommending. It keeps it pretty tight and straightforward, even down to the title, 2023's Plane. Featuring, you guessed it, a plane, and starring Gerard Butler and Mike Colter, it tells the story of a commercial airline pilot whose flight goes down over the JoJo Islands in the Philippines. The bad news, all his passengers get kidnapped by evil local rebels. The good news, he's Gerard fucking Butler, and it turns out one of his passengers is Mike fucking Colter of Luke Cage fame, and together they start whooping a whole lot of ass, baby. This movie reminded me of the Jerry Bruckheimer-produced films of the 90s, stuff like Con Air and The Rock, and I say that as a compliment. It's 90 minutes of turn-off-your-brain, action-packed fun that satisfies. Mike Colter kills a fucking guy with a sledgehammer. Like, a couple guys, actually. That's worth the price of admission. Plane is currently available for rent or purchase on Amazon Prime. I think right now it still might be in theaters. But, I mean, it's probably not going to be too long before it's on some streaming service for free. I know it's Lionsgate, right? So we were talking about where it might be, Ryan. We're not sure. Probably Stars.
First. I don't know where else, but Stars first for sure.
I hope Hulu picks it up. Pick it up, Hulu. And that's great. So Schlenzo, what you've thought of a bad Western now?
Nope, because they
you
don't
had that
exist.
Whole time to think. All right, what's your recommendation?
Yeah. So, I know everyone was wondering, am I going to start recommending J. Lee Thompson movies or Charlie Bronson movies? And after much soul searching and talking with a priest and Ryan Luis Rodriguez, I've decided to stick to Charlie Bronson movies, and I am recommending the only Charlie Bronson movie that came up when you Googled Charlie Bronson sci-fi, and that is The Master of the World from 1961. It is based on the novels of Jules Verne, and it follows a team of ballooning adventurers who are kidnapped by, you guessed it, Vincent Price, and from there, they are on his gigantic airship called the Albatross. Vincent Price is a madman who is trying to beat the world into submission. He's a radical pacifist, is what they say, and he's bombing warships all over the globe, and it's up to Charlie Bronson and Henry Hull to stop them. Henry Hull steals the show as the leader of the Ballooning Society, and everything he says is an absolute stitch. Master of the World is a classic adventure movie that everyone will like. It will keep you entertained from start to finish. It is not streaming anywhere that I can recall because I had to Google it a lot to find it anywhere.
Yep. And it's Jules Verne, right?
That's right.
It's a short story, or a novel?
It's based on a couple different novels of his, according to what I read. I haven't read the actual novel that it would be based off of, but it's a classic Verne. A crazy inventor makes a superstructure that can, intimidate the world. Good stuff. It's kind of like that Japanese submarine movie that I love so well. What was that one?
Atragon.
Atragon, yes. It's like Atragon, only with an airship and Vincent Price.
Ooh, I'm sold.
Yes.
Big Ben, why don't you
That's
send us...
all you had to say, Dylan.
Big Ben, why don't you send us on home?
I'm going to recommend a Swedish space film I saw recently and say you should check out Aniara, which is based on a poem of the same name. Aniara is the name of a spaceship that is essentially a whole city that shuttles people from Earth to Mars on a multi-week journey. They encounter some unexpected space debris, however, and are forced to veer off course, and their fuel has to be ejected because of a rupture to the spaceship's hull. And this sends the ship off into space, way off their normal course with no fuel. There's no way to course correct. All the passengers manage to survive on algae, though. So what follows is how the passengers of the Aniara, or the Nihilism One, as you might start to call it, deal with the increasing pointlessness of their existences just being trapped on this one ship. Do you hold out for hope? Maybe there will be something you can slingshot around. Maybe there will be some probe that has some fuel cells you can steal. Or maybe existence is truly pointless. I don't want to give too much away, but the film does take a long period of time with the births, cults, political blame, etc., that everyone has to deal with on how they're supposed to deal with the rest of their lives with literally nowhere to go but the emptiness beyond. So not a feel-good movie for sure, but if somber reflection is your jam, then you can check out Aniara on Dylan's platform of choice, Tubi.
All right.
No, I don't want to watch it on Tubi.
Does this count? Worst Western, Bad Western, The Ridiculous Six, the Sandler movie?
I'll allow it.
Like, or A Million Ways to Die in the West, because they're comedies.
Sucks. That movie sucks.
All right, tentative. Well, that's a placeholder. We'll review it on a future episode.
Did we find Wild Wild West not guilty?
I think that was
that's
guilty.
Weird West.
That's
not a Western. That's a Weird West. It's
All
a
right.
completely different genre.
Jonah Hex?
That's Weird West.
Movie.
That's Weird West.
Okay.
And it's Weird West. Completely different genre.
I think we're out of show here.
No, we're not. We're forgetting about the Olsen twins, How the West Was Fun.
That sounds excellent.
Yeah. So maybe you're right. Maybe there are no bad, non-weird, non-comedy Westerns. As long as they keep it straight, they'll be fine, especially as long as they have the Olsen twins. And with that, Ben, now we're out of show. But we want to thank our guest, Isaac Arthur, for joining us. Thank you so much, Isaac.
Thank you, guys.
Do you think that the Olsen twins...
Schwarzenegger's Western.
Oh, what's
Arnold
that?
Schwarzenegger had a Western?
Before you even did Conan, the villain.
Oh, you have to watch that, Schlinzo.
Yeah, no kidding. My God. Thank you
He
for
was
being out of my
in the
radar.
80s, so yeah.
This town is big enough for the both of us.
It doesn't exist.
It's got Kirk Douglas in it. How can it be bad?
You reach for the sky. There's a snake in my boot.
Oh, here it is. Arnie plays the Indian chief. That's what. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
He's billed as handsome stranger.
God. Didn't age well. With that, we got to get out of here. But we hope Isaac will join us again as well, and we hope everyone else will too, as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
Olsen's.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.